Hi there. Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. And our guest today is Chris Pramas of Green Ronin Publishing. Instead of broadcasting from Kadea's studio, we have joined the war effort against this alien virus thingy, where our duty is to stay home and try and starve out the virus by withholding the food. Just us. But we have a duty to you still to seek out untold stories behind your favorite games. And I'm sure our guest today has some great stories. Chris,
hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Welcome to my home office.
Yeah, hey, it looks great. I see some games there. That's good.
Oh, yeah. Games all around me.
Woohoo, woohoo. Yeah, so this is the new format for us. We're usually we were going to meet now. Chris and I, we were going to have our interview last week at this time at the Chaldea studio. But as everybody knows, we're going towards lockdown, and so I think Chris, you were wise to say, "Hey, I'm not so sure about this."
Yeah,
and I was having the same. I think we were all coming to the same conclusion that maybe it's time to go to Zoom or something and
get some social distancing.
Get some social distancing. So here we are. I hope this goes well for everybody who's watching now or watching later. We're trying out. We're doing this on Zoom, and our guy has jury-rigged Zoom and hacked it so that it comes out on Twitch somehow. I don't understand how that works, but so it looks good. Magic. It's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing we have adult supervision here, or else, my gosh, it'd be crazy. All right, so hey, Chris, let's get to know Chris Pramas here a bit. I kind of like to go through basically just your life in 1 hour. So sum it up with some particular love for D&D and D20, which is kind of the focus of our show. But first of all, where are you from? Where were you raised?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I grew up in a town called Peabody, which is about a half hour north of Boston. Peabody, yes.
Peabody.
Yep, that is the local pronunciation.
Hey,
you can tell people who aren't from there when they want to say Peabody. They're like, nope, it's Peabody.
Nope, it's Peabody.
Yeah, it's right next to Salem. Yeah. So
I'm Chris Pramas. My company is Green Ronin, and I'm from Peabody.
That's right.
You got it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I lived there for 18 years, and then I moved to New York City and never looked back. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, did you go to college?
I did.
You get a degree in small press publishing?
Well, it's funny now because there actually are game design programs in universities, and that was not a thing in the 80s.
No.
I went to NYU for undergrad, and then I did graduate school at the New School for Social Research, which is another New York City school. So mostly studied history, and it's good training for doing RPG work because
it's fantastic training. I study history too. What part of history did you like? I know you're a big fan of World War II, but it's probably I don't know if that's what you studied in school.
So I actually studied like the history of revolutions with a particular focus on peasant revolutions. So
oh my God, that might be useful.
Well, yeah, now it might be. I'm a big just history fan of all sorts. I have read a lot about World War II, but going back to ancient history and all that. So
right. Wow. Okay. Well, great. So how did that lead you into? I mean, I think if I remember right, you had your first game companies while you were in school, or shortly after school, or what?
So I got into the industry as a freelance writer, and so that happened while I was still in school. And actually, so with my graduate school, I never actually took the degree because I started to get paid for game writing. And so it would be like, well, I could write this paper or I could get paid for this game writing. So, I think I know which thing I'm more excited about. So I failed to get my graduate degree, but I started a career. So I guess, fair trade.
And who were you write for? I assume RPGs, then, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Role-playing game. Who were some of your early?
So the first game I did professional work on was a game called Underground from Mayfair Games, designed by Ray Winninger.
Ray Winninger. It was sort of a superheroes. Was that right?
Yeah, he ran the RPG line for Mayfair. Did the third edition of DC Heroes.
Right.
And now he's in charge of D&D at Wizards of the Coast. So it's all full circle.
Maybe Ray can get both of his jobs there.
Things
don't go so well for the next year or two.
I have experience.
Looking for work.
Yeah. So yeah, I did some writing for Underground. I also I did some work for James Wallace at Hogshead Publishing on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I wrote for a game called The Whispering Vaults. I wrote for Over the Edge from Atlas Games, a bunch of stuff, Feng Shui as well. So, after doing that for a couple of years, I foolishly decided to start my own game company, and that was Ronin Publishing, the precursor to Green Ronin.
Green Ronin Publishing, yeah. Right,
mm-hmm.
Right. Didn't you, the Whispering Vault? I remember that somehow. I think
it's because you gave them money, Peter. At the height of Magic, when Magic was making money hand over fist, you gave some funding to small game companies, and one of them was Mike Neistel. Yeah, Pariah Press was the company.
That's right, Pariah Press. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So they did not last, and so my new company bought the Whispering Vault from them, and so I had been working on a game that was going to be like shamans and wizards and occult forces in World War II gather together to fight Nazis. But we thought it would be faster to buy an existing game, and just establish our company that way. So we picked up the Whispering Vault and tried to make a go of it for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was kind of similar. At Wizards, we started doing role-playing games first, and we did a similar move. We took over the Bard Games line to Talislana and other products in it, and that was the same sort of logic. It was like, okay, we're coming a new company. We did new games with Primal Order, but to also have this line that people know about and with a bunch of inventory, I think it was helpful. I think it was a real helpful move for us.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a good move if it had worked in giving us a springboard to do our own games, but it was just a struggle to start an RPG company from scratch, when my day job was working as a barista in a New York coffee store. so it was what you call classically underfunded. We just didn't have much money to work with, really. So it was hard. So we published some Whispering Vault stuff, and then I had written a book for Feng Shui called Blood of the Valiant that was supposed to be published by Daedalus, who was the original publisher of that game, and they started to just go down, and I was able to make a deal with them before they kind of sank under the waves to publish that book through my own company. So we published that as well. But I was still technically running that company when I was first hired at Wizards, which was March of 1998. But it sort of wound down, once I got to Seattle.
Right. So tell us about getting onto Wizards of the Coast. Like, how did you get a lead there, or whatever? How did that get started?
So I had decided to move out to Seattle, in parts because I had met my future wife, Nicole, and she was on the West Coast, and I wanted to get closer to her. But it did not escape me that moving to Seattle would be a good career move because Wizards was there and a bunch of game industry stuff was happening there. So when I first got here, I attempted to live off of full-time freelance work. And that didn't work at all because freelance work was all pay on publication, and you as the freelancer have no control over when the publication is. So, you can be told, oh, it'll be out in March, but then they have problems of whatever sort, and it's pushed back 3 months. And when you're trying to pay your rent, that doesn't really work. I had friends at Wizards. I'd actually started to go down there and play games on some weeknights. And so I heard there was an opening in what was then called the TSR product group, looking for a designer. So I applied for that, and that's how I got in.
So before we dive into that, there's a question on chat from Mental Sprue asks you, as a history nut, they know you. What historical period would you love to write an RPG in outside of the pirate age? Okay, so you got to put that aside. Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of reading and podcast listening about ancient Rome recently. Just, long-term interest of mine. And I definitely have had ideas while doing so. I think 69 AD was the year of 4 emperors, and it was just this hugely eventful time where there was, plotting and counter-plotting and backstabbing and, civil war and armies and all this stuff. And, I think that would be a really interesting period to do an RPG.
I cannot disagree. I think there's something about the Romans. I mean, they were like legit badass, right? I mean, and it was just, it took quite a while before the world got back to sort of a lot of things that the Romans did.
And just a few months ago, I was a guest over at the Lucca convention in Italy. And so I got to see Lucca. And then after that, I went down to Rome for 5 days and also made a day trip to Pompeii. So just being able to walk the streets of Pompeii and go to the Roman Forum and all that stuff, it was pretty awesome.
Nice. Oh, excuse me. Oh, nope, it's not the virus. I'm okay.
Get this man some whiskey.
I'm just okay. I know now, it's in an era where every time you cough, your wife looks at you like, you okay? No, I cough normally, actually.
I was on the bus on Monday, and one person coughed, and every head on the bus whipped around
Right, exactly. Yeah. So what? So back to the Wizard of the Coast story. So what? So you were hired in a TSR product group. What was what was your first assignment? Who hired you? Who were you working for with? Blah, blah, blah.
So I was hired for, I want to say it was the 3rd attempt to do a Magic the Gathering role-playing game. I believe there had been 2 attempts at Wizards before the TSR acquisition, and then TSR became part of Wizards, and then I was hired in to work on a team with Jesper Meerfors, who is Magic's original art director, and Jonathan Tweet, and John Ratliff, Tolkien scholar and all-around swell guy. And so we were trying to basically marry D&D and Magic. Jonathan was supposed to do the rules. I was supposed to do the world. John was editor. Jesper was art director. That was the plan, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I'm cringing, because I look back and I felt like it was one of my failures at Wizards that I couldn't effectively inspire the company to do it. I mean, obviously, I inspired you and Jesper. Well, you got hired to do it. Jonathan and Jesper liked the idea, and John Ratliff I did like the idea. But it was, and I even remember in my first in the board of directors meeting when I was pitching the idea of acquiring TSR. You list off all these synergies of why it's a good idea, not just from the money. Once you get past the money, you just it's well, we could cross these 2 brands. We could have a Magic the Gathering role-playing universe using Dungeons and Dragons. It would be fantastic. The 2 best brands in gaming together. And, that looks great on a PowerPoint. But it turned out nobody in the Magic team wanted anything to do with D&D, and nobody in the D&D team wanted anything to do with Magic.
Well, I mean, this is probably going to be a theme as we talk about my time at Wizards. But, my experience with Wizards was that it was like like a bunch of feudal fiefdoms, like within the company, like all, at various degrees of war with each other. And so, the magic people, they didn't want this project, and they kept pitching up excuses for why it shouldn't happen. And then the one they landed on, which killed the project, was, well, but yeah, now we're working on 3rd edition D&D, and you guys are doing some like 2nd edition variant thing. So surely, the company is going to put all its weight behind 3rd edition. We should just wait and do it later. And wait and do it later meant never do it. But
there was an attempt to keep doing that. I mean, I was certainly trying. I was the last to let go of that. I was but I remember, I don't know if it was Rick Aarons or Scaff or who it was came up to me and just like, everybody's just going to be super upset if we do this project, and then it was one of those times I got all the brand marketing stuff thrown in my face, like Magic the Gathering core values are about collectability and competition and all this stuff like that. And, Dungeons and Dragons role-playing doesn't fit in there. You don't like open up a pack of role-playing books and find a Lotus, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, skipping ahead a bit, when I was working on the miniatures team, we were trying to come up with a Magic miniatures game because that was something else that you wanted. And the Magic team gave us this like checklist of things, that their brand people had decided were things that, that every Magic product had to tick these boxes, right?
Right,
and,
exactly.
And for most of them, for a miniatures game, it was easy. It was like, ultimate battle of wits. Well, great. Like you're a general commanding your troops. Perfect. Has to have big ass creatures. Like, great. Big miniatures. Awesome. We can do that. Right. And, we ticked all the boxes till it got down to lottery ticket feel. And they wanted some sort of collectible something. And this was before Mage Knight, changed the arena by doing collectible miniatures. But like as sort of traditional miniatures people, we were like, well, you can't put a miniature in a box and sell to people without them seeing it. That's crazy, And so it was a real stumbling block to what we were trying to do. And that project also never went anywhere.
Yep. That's oh well. Okay. So I gotta add before we leave the Magic. I just it was I'm not gonna say let's just move on. Oh man. That would have been a lot of fun to work on it. I was really enjoying when we were playtesting it. That was a good. So okay, so when that got canceled, what happened to you after that? Where'd you end up?
So then I just became a designer in what would later be redubbed role-playing R&D, and I started writing mostly D&D books. I did one alternative project, which was the sci-fi game that had a short life, but otherwise I wrote D&D books. So the first thing I did was the Guide to Hell. For 2nd edition, actually all these things were 2nd edition books. So I did Guide to Hell. I co-wrote Slavers, which was a sequel to the Slave Lords modules of yore, with Sean Reynolds. I did Vortex of Madness, which started.
The Guide to Hell. I want to interview the Guide to Hell. That was that the Monty Cook?
No, Monty had done
Paladin. He did Paladin in Hell later on with 3rd edition, right?
Paladin in Hell predated my book because I used it as a source. So it was a late TSR product for 2nd edition. Guide to Hell was an unusual book because basically, in old TSR, they had created all these different lines, and not everyone would back all the various D&D lines. So Planescape kind of became its own identity, and all the planar material went in there, but a lot of the core D&D players wouldn't buy Planescape because they're like, oh, I'm not a Planescape player. So my brief on Guide to Hell was to do a planar book that was not a Planescape book, but was something that was a core book. So, but it put me in a weird position because essentially I had to take a lot of Planescape material and rework it, without all the cant and all that stuff, and represent it for a core audience while, trying to add things of my own. So when it came out, longtime players were like, well, like, what's the point of this book? So much of this is just a rehash. And it was like, well, that was the brief. So, yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, gamers. We're a finicky lot. We're a finicky lot. Sometimes we are a little curmudgeon-y.
Yeah. Although, funny story regarding the Guide to Hell. I guess it was last year. Wizards did this new big book that took place in Hell. God, what was it called? I can't remember. Anyway, the whole thing is like a big adventure that happens in Avernus, which is the first level of Hell. So I was curious about it because, I had done the Guide to Hell. And somebody on Twitter was like, hey, did you create Zariel? And I was like, what now? And it turned out the main character, the main, villain you can possibly redeem of the whole adventure was a character that I had done in the Guide to Hell. And it was just like it was a paragraph or two, it was not some like big thing I remembered. I had to actually go look it up and be like, I don't know. Let me check. And so, it was very strange. Of all the things I did, like that little thing was plucked out. And then she became a major character in this storyline. Yeah.
Okay, so hold on. I got to shut down a little chat thing that's going on here. Somebody's like, okay. Is Peter regretting this chat yet? No. We love talking about how screwed up Wizards was there. Even when I was running it, I admit it. Wizards was screwed up. I was 29 when I started that company. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Yeah. And besides, it's a company full of gamers. You tell me a game company full of gamers is not screwed up. We're all fiefdoms, war, conquest.
Yeah.
That's the only way we know how to be, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, I'm a curmudgeon. Just like the rest of you. Yeah, okay.
Well,
I'm clicking chat off. I'm just going to turn it off right now.
I mean, when I was younger, I was much willing to assume like bad faith in certain things that happened, but it's not always the case, Right. So like with that new Wizards book, like in all the new D&D stuff, they'll have a little section in the credits that's like, here are the books that were sources for this. And Guide to Hell isn't listed. And, if I were younger me, I'd probably be like, bah, this is a slight. But, the truth is that D&D is a huge and sprawling IP, and not everyone remembers where each little bit came from. And, I don't think anyone was trying to slight me. It's just they didn't know, because who's around from 20 years ago?
That's right. Well, okay, so you started, and the Slavers was with Sean Reynolds, right?
Right.
He was on our show. I was gonna say last week because I think he was our last guest, but it was 2 weeks ago. So he mentioned that he verified your story on that one, or you're verifying his story on that one. So that's good. And
that was fun because I had played those adventures when I was younger, so having an opportunity to get to write the sequel was enjoyable.
Now, was that still second edition? Or
yes,
still, yeah,
yes. Because as you probably remember, there was an attempt to relaunch Greyhawk at Wizards using second edition rules. So I was working on Lisa Stevens' team at that time. She was running the Greyhawk thing.
Right. Yeah. Vaguely remember that. Yeah.
It's a half dozen books or so,
Right. Okay, so then where'd you go? What'd you work on after that?
I did an adventure with Jason Carl, who now works on Vampire and a bunch of other stuff, called The Apocalypse.
He's got like a really big show on Twitch, I think.
Yeah,
World of Darkness. So yeah,
yep.
yeah. It's I watched a little bit of it. It's great, fantastic.
Yeah.
So Apocalypse Stone. Yeah. What was Apocalypse Stone? So and this one, I remember. I don't remember this one. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. So the brief for the Apocalypse Stone was, well, like the whole department's working on 3rd edition, and we want people to switch over from 2nd to 3rd. So the Apocalypse Stone was meant to be an adventure that could either end your 2nd edition campaign to make way for 3rd, or give you a story reason that the world changes in very fundamental ways that then make the 3rd edition rules make sense. So you could carry over the story.
Now I remember it.
Yeah.
Now I remember it.
Yeah. So it was a chance to be really over the top. I got to use the Tarrasque in a way that made sense because it's the end of the world, baby. Yeah.
Nice. Did we publish that? Did it get out?
Yeah, it came out.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Years later, I was working at a video game company, and I was out to lunch with some people on my team, and they were asking me about things I had written, and I mentioned I had done the Apocalypse Stone, and a guy in the front seat turned around, and he's like, "You wrote that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Screw you." Because like it had blown up his campaign, and it had been, I don't know, traumatic for them or something. It's like mission accomplished, I guess.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so like every time I meet someone who has something to tell me about, Wizards Days or something like that, there's always this brace of like, either it's going to be great or it's going to be screw you. One of those two, right? I mean, you just kind of don't know where the landmines are. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was so. Okay. Well, I got it. So how does the world blow up at the end? Does the stone or we were worried about spoilers? So this is 20-some years ago, right? We're not worried about spoilers at this point.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah,
Apocalypse Stone. Spoiler alert.
I came up with the basic plot, which was basically that there was an actual stone that was the axis mundi of the world, and the player characters are tricked into stealing it, because they think they're helping, but actually they've been fooled. And by removing, the axis mundi, it actually like knocks their world off kilter, and creates all these devastating follow-on effects. And then the rest of the adventure, you have an opportunity to put it right. But the ending of it, your options are basically like just blow up the world, and that's the end of the campaign, or the characters survive, but the world doesn't, or, you survive, but now things have changed so much that, all of a sudden, gnolls are playable races, and whatever you like from 3rd edition. By the way,
love that.
Big Yeenagoo fan here, so I'm all about the gnolls.
Oh my god. Okay, well, awesome. Yeah, that does sound like the type of product that could get some people really emotionally attached to in a negative way to our efforts there. Oh well.
Well, okay, it's up to your group to use it or not use it, right? I mean, it's
right. Okay, so we're about halfway through time, so I want to like kind of anything else you want to say, kind of like the WotC era, because I want to get to Green Ronin and kind of devote the last half of the hour to your current company, because it also is on topic with the whole D20 stuff. So take us up through the end of your time at WotC.
So basically, I spent about 18 months working on RPG stuff. And then at the time, Wizards was spinning up a miniatures division because it wanted to get into that arena. And I felt like it was hard to make a mark at the TSR side of things when you still had people, like Harold Johnson, right, from way back when, and Skip Williams, and people like that, and that I could potentially make a bigger mark starting a new thing at Wizards. And also, I just love miniatures. So I took the opportunity to throw my hat in the ring, and I initially worked for a guy named Bob Watts. He's got a long history in miniatures gaming, going back to casting miniatures at Grenadier in like the 70s. And so I went to work for Bob, and the idea was that I would be in charge of making the games that the miniatures department would do. But then this just crashed into Wizards like internal politics so hard, because it took a long time for me to get transferred. And then once I was transferred to miniatures, then I was told, oh, you can't do game design anymore. You're not in R&D. The whole point of the transfer was to put me in miniatures so I could design miniatures games. So it was a whole thing. And that was a game that started out with a plan under Bob to do a skirmish game initially, and then scale it up to a mass battle game that could interact with your D&D game. So you could have big battles with, hundreds of miniatures on the table and all this stuff. But Wizards just had a very difficult time doing non-collectible things. And, the resources we had were not enough. The COO at the time told me and my 4 teammates, I want you to kick Games Workshop's ass. And, Games Workshop is a company that had hundreds of stores, factories, giant headquarters with hundreds of people all doing miniatures, day in, day out. And we had like 4 people. So it was a tall order. So Bob didn't last. He couldn't really navigate the politics of Wizards. So we had a succession of people who took over from him, and they changed the brief and changed everything. And by the time the game came out, it was a skirmish game only, which limited how much anyone was going to spend. If you only need 12 miniatures to play, you're not going to buy 300 miniatures. And, it came out. We supported it for a year, something like that. And then a week before it won an Origins Award, it was canceled. So good times. I gave what I'm told was a very memorable speech at the Origins Awards.
So at the Origins Awards, you're giving a speech to accept the award for the miniatures game.
That was just canceled.
A week after, it was just canceled. Yeah. Okay. I am now starting to regret this chat. Yeah. Let's. I think it'd be a lot more fun to talk about Green Ronin.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. No, that's well on to you, Chris, and to the many other hundreds of Dash to Dreams. I apologize for my role in everything, So
well, look, man, it was a big company. Not everything was your fault. So, and to be clear, I mean, I didn't go to college for game industry stuff, but working at Wizards for 4 years was kind of like college. Like I learned a lot, that was helpful to me later when running my own company. So
well, there you go. Good. I'm glad it was useful. Yeah. Good. All right. So so you left Wizards and started Green Ronin. What's that story?
So I actually started Green Ronin in the middle of my tenure at Wizards. It was the year 2000, Peter. Imagine it, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah. It's our 20th anniversary at Green Ronin this year.
Congratulations, by the way. Not many game companies survive that long.
Thanks. Yeah. And really, it started as a side project because I had gone to work on miniatures, and I found after a while I kind of missed doing role-playing work. And I thought, well, why don't I start a side company and just do some fun projects to kind of keep my finger in the role-playing pie. Right. And so the first thing we did was a beer and pretzels game called Orc, the role-playing game, which we now have a second edition of that came out last year, by the way. Thank you. But then as I was working on that was the period when the open game license was being floated at Wizards as a way to let third-party companies publish D&D compatible material. And so I was involved in these meetings with R&D, about whether the OGL was a good idea or not, and what the company hoped for it, and so on. And one of the hopes was that other companies would do things like short adventures, which Wizards had difficulty making money off of, and thus like provide a value to gamers and do something that Wizards, would prefer not to do. And so I remember sitting in one of those meetings and thinking, well, hell, I could do it. I could design a short adventure and have it out the very day that the Player's Handbook launches. And I did. I wrote an adventure called Death in Freeport. Yeah. And first day at Gen Con, year 2000, Player's Handbook came out, and we had Death in Freeport for sale. So that's really the thing that kind of put us on the map, as it were.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That's great. I certainly remember that. I certainly remember you coming out with that. I certainly remember Ryan and Jonathan Tweet, Ryan Dancy and I and Scaff talking about, well, we know we have at least one company out there that likes this.
Yeah. Well, of the established companies, there was a lot of skepticism because many of them were like, this must be a trap, or, this is a way for Wizards to destroy all other role-playing systems.
Yeah.
And so now,
I think we might have lost you a little bit. Well, I don't know if you can hear me, Chris. I'll add to that story a little bit. We just had Sean Reynolds on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was involved a lot in TSR. He worked at TSR before it was acquired by Wizards, and his job there was the online rep, basically the online community manager for TSR for many years before really that sort of thing was in vogue. And what I think a lot of people don't realize was that intellectual property of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think a lot of game companies before the late 90s, was very tightly regulated. Like, we didn't understand what this internet thing was. We didn't understand how aggressively we should be protecting our intellectual property, because certainly in the world of printed books, companies are advised to be quite protective about their their products, right? And so the fact that people were out on the internet, this is a big playground, and people were out producing all their own D&D material, basically unlicensed. It was that was the mindset before the OGL, and after the OGL was now, I think there's a little bit more of a, doesn't seem as radical of an idea as it did then. Yeah. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, things were a lot more locked down, and it didn't stop people from self-publishing D&D material in the 80s and 90s, but there was a lot of lawsuits about that stuff and blah blah blah, and so the
I remember one of them.
Yeah, I know you do. So yeah, I mean, the OGL really allowed a legal framework for people to do something that had been happening anyway in this gray area. So it was a plus for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, you ended up deciding to. It was 2 years later, though, before you left Wizards, right? So for 2 years, you kept producing Green Ronin products under the OGL while working at Wizards.
Yeah, so we that first adventure we decided to make into a trilogy. So we followed it up with Terror in Freeport and then Madness in Freeport. And that made a nice story block, what the kids might call an adventure path these days. And I also wrote a book in that period called Legions of Hell, where I tried to kind of trade on my cachet, as it were, of having done the Guide to Hell by doing a monster book of devils. So that was also one of our early books.
Right.
And then in March of 2002, I was laid off. And so then I just stepped into doing Green Ronin full time after that.
Right. Now, wasn't there some confusion about why Green Ronin wasn't called Privateer Press?
I wouldn't say confusion. It was more like, we had Freeport and all this pirate stuff, and then Privateer came out, and it took them years and years to actually add pirates into War Machine, which they eventually did. But for a while, I was like, man, we should have been Privateer Press because we got the pirates.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what? Let's talk a little bit about what it was like to operate within the OGL, like doing, like even doing the first product. Let's stay on Freeport, the first Freeport, for a moment. Were you conversing a lot with people at Wizards about it, like other teammates? Were you talking to like Jonathan Tweed or anybody like that about?
Not a lot. There was I want to say there was a mailing list of some sort for interested publishers, or maybe it was just an email chain. I don't quite remember. But basically, the OGL, it wasn't quite ready. And so we had to there was what was called a gentleman's agreement to let the initial group of companies willing to take a chance to publish stuff right away. So if you look at the original Death in Freeport adventure in the open game license, there's a part called Section 15, which is basically a bunch of legalese about your sources and, like how people should credit work if they borrow from you and blah, 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 blah. And basically nobody got that right initially because everyone was, was just groping forward and trying to get material out. And that stuff all solidified later. So there was discussion amongst, essentially interested parties and over on EN World and places like that. And, we were just trying to make sure we weren't going to step on any toes.
Right. So, you eventually did Mutants and Masterminds, under the OGL license too, right? I mean, so tell us about that.
Okay, so Steve Kenson, super talented person, been working for us for about 18 years, I guess, longer freelance. Steve had designed a superhero city for another publisher, originally for the Champions game. And that publisher basically started winding down. They weren't going to publish it. And so there was a day where Steve said, man, I wish I could get this city of mine published because I put all this work into it. And I said, well, Steve, if you design me a D20 superhero game, I will publish your city. And so Steve was like, are you serious? I said, absolutely. And then we were off to the races. So Steve basically designed superhero RPGs for fun. And so I put him on the project. The initial idea was that it would bear the D20 logo, because basically one of the things in the very early days of D20 was that people believed you needed the D20 logo on a book for it to sell. That without the logo, people wouldn't understand that it was compatible with D&D or what have you. And so the idea of using only the open game license, but not the D20 trademark license, like people were like, oh, that couldn't work. And Steve was designing, and he just kept coming to me with questions that boiled down to, should I adhere to the D&D rules, or should I make it more appropriate for the superhero genre? And my answer every time was make it superhero appropriate because it's a superhero game. And so ultimately the rules drifted far enough from D&D, it didn't have classes or things like that, that we decided to publish it as a standalone game and not have the D20 logo on it. And so it was one of the very first games to do that, and then ended up being a huge hit for us.
But so you didn't put the D20 logo on it,
no.
But you talk about it as an OGL product.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
in what ways do you feel still was connected to D&D enough to warrant an OGL sort of positioning, if not logo?
Yeah. Well, so it uses the D&D characteristics, right? So strength, intelligence, wisdom, it retains levels, but uses it in a different way. Basically, in the first edition, one level would give you so many power points. You use power points to buy skills and superpowers and things like that. It was overall a point-based system. But, we had skills, we had feats, that were all basically derived from D20 stuff. So, if you had played D&D, there was a lot of it that would feel familiar to you. Although one innovation of the game is that instead of using all the polyhedral dice, it only used a D20 for resolution. So, it was a little different.
Monty Cook was on our show, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he mentioned Mutants and Masterminds as one of the first OGL games that was published, and talked about how it was a challenge for him and some of the other people on the 3rd edition team. Like, well, we didn't really design 3rd edition to be cross-genre, something that, as sort of a core game engine that can be used all over the place. It sounds like you kind of ran into those sorts of problems with trying to do a superheroes game with it. Is that, I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, that's right. Because, if we had tried to do a superhero game that had, strict classes and class progression, it just doesn't feel right for supers,
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of things happened in the D20 era that people didn't predict, the whole idea of open game content where, like game mechanics and things have to be declared as open game content if they're derivative, which of course almost everything is. And in the early days, people at Wizards didn't think that anybody would, for example, reprint all the spells out of the player's handbook, because why would you do that? The player's handbook is out there. But you know what? Like, we did these books called Pocket Arcana, where we took the core spells and spells from a bunch of different OGL sources and compiled them and alphabetized them and and wow, we sold a lot of that book.
Right.
And that was or those books. But yeah, there were things that weren't conceived of when the OGL was conceived that happened because it kind of was the Wild West for a while.
Right. So the D20 OGL, sort of, especially the first 3 or 4 years of it, was certainly, from Wizards' perspective, I think a big success. It got everybody talking about D&D. It got everybody playing outside of people who would normally play D&D, playing a D&D-like system, comparing to D&D. But I think for some publishers, it was mixed in terms of, in the long run, looking back for Green Ronin, I think it's fair to say that you guys did pretty well with it, but not everybody did. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, so what happened was, the companies that got into it early on, like, were able to sell product in huge numbers, just, as by way of example, like Guide to Hell, as a late era 2nd edition D&D product, sold about 15,000 copies the year it came out. And it was one of the best selling D&D titles of that year.
That's good numbers.
Yeah. Now, the first print run of Death in Freeport was 10,000 copies, and I sold it all within the year. So, for a tiny company to be able to pop out a book and sell 10,000 copies, that was crazy. But, once there was money to be made, then, of course, everybody jumped in. Lots of new companies formed. Lots of old companies got into it. And, you would end up, there were years where the Gamma trade show floor, like half of it or more, was role-playing companies publishing D20 stuff,
Right.
Whereas, like a couple weeks ago at Gamma Trade Show in Reno, there were a half dozen role-playing publishers, maybe, on the floor. So different times. But of course, it couldn't last because there was just too much stuff being cranked out too fast. And there were some companies that really embraced the shovelware concept of just putting out stuff of dubious quality as fast as they could. And then there was a big crash, in the end. And a lot of the new companies went out of business. Some of the old companies went out of business. And, the survivors had to come up with other strategies.
Right. Now, is it still, like you said, there's like maybe 6 RPG companies or OGL RPG companies?
No, RPG companies.
At Gamma this year. Yeah. So how much do you think people are still doing business based around OGL products, like 5th edition and stuff?
Well, so 5th edition is interesting because they created this thing called the DM's Guild, which in a way like shoves the genie back into the bottle, because what they've done is create a discrete environment that they control. So if you want to publish through the DM's Guild, it's all online, Wizards gets a cut. And it's all, done essentially through a single website, and there are limits on what you can do. The OGL is still available to you, but there's you're limited. So, we've done some 5th edition books. We did a 5th edition version of Book of the Righteous, which is one of our most popular D20 books, only using the OGL. But there's an enormous mass of publishing happening now through the DM's Guild that it does not impact the store environment at all. None of that material ever appears in a store. So it's just a whole other, channel essentially. But if you go to Gamma Trade Show, you don't see it. It's like it's all happening online.
Right. So what else are you working on at Green Ronin? We're getting towards the end of our hour, so
all right.
Kind of want to, what would you like to talk about in terms of what you've done any time in the last 20 years of Green Ronin?
First, I want to thank Seattle for actually having the damn sun come out during this, because what are the odds? So, I apologize for all the sun on my face.
Yeah, it's been creating nice little patterns, little streaks. Sometimes you lean just right and your nose lights up. The rest of you is in shadows.
So basically, about 10 years ago, I designed a game called Dragon Age. So it was we got a license from BioWare and to do an RPG supporting that. And when they came to me, it was before the first game came out, and they said, "Yeah, we're going to do the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. We think it'd be cool if there was a tabletop game to go with it. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Well, you're BioWare, so yes, I do want to do it."
Yes,
and I thought it was an opportunity to take video game players and turn them into tabletop players. So I tried to design a system that was very welcoming to new players and easy to get into and play. And so we called that system the Adventure Game Engine. And that has turned into kind of the driving force of Green Ronin's last 10 years. So now we have a whole suite of games that are all powered using that engine. So there's Dragon Age, there's Fantasy Age, which is basically like the more generic version of those same rules. Blue Rose, which is the romantic fantasy RPG using those rules. Modern Age, and the Expanse. All those games use the Adventure Game Engine. And then we still publish Mutants Masterminds. That's in its 3rd edition now as well. So,
by the way, congrats on Expanse. I mean,
thank you.
Love that series. Love the books. Love the TV series. It's a fantastic series.
Yeah, and both of the authors are gamers, and so it was really nice to be able to work with licensors who knew exactly what we were doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how does do you mind talking about Expanse for a minute, because I love it? So
no, not at all.
Yeah, so how does it play at its core? Like what is the premise? What you and your group of friends, what are you doing? Are you following the plot line from the series, or are you doing your own sort of?
No, well, so
it's
basically
always the challenge, and trying to do a licensed RPG. So I'm curious how you solve that.
Yeah. Well, so you've got a bunch of options, right? I mean, we give you the rules material where if you want to be like, you're a squad of Martian Marines, you could do that campaign. the first published campaign we did is called Abzu's Bounty. And that one does take a lot more direct inspiration from the plot of the books. So essentially, like, you start on an ice hauler and, you encounter the proto-molecule in a different way, as the main events of the books and things like that. But essentially, we set the game in between the events of the first novel and the second novel. So the proto-molecule has been revealed, but what exactly it means and all that, is still to come. And then as the line advances, we're releasing new books that move the timeline forward. So we're working on a book now called Beyond the Ring, and that's when the ring gates open. And then that's a whole new style of adventure. It's go into these systems and explore, and what do you find, and so on.
Yeah.
And we'll continue. Yeah. And so we'll continue doing that. To go through the books. And if you've read all the books, you know that every couple of books there's massive changes in in the state of the galaxy, so or the system. So yeah, those will become new ways to have adventures and things like that.
It sounds great. I was really happy when you got the license, and I look forward to trying it at some point. You know how it is. So
thank you.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. So.
I'd also like to mention that we did start a fiction imprint last year called Nasaba Press. So we've started to publish novels and short stories based in our worlds. So we've now published a Blue Rose novel by Joe Carricker called Shadowtide. It's super good. We've got a couple of different Mutants and Masterminds novels. Road Trip to Ruin is the one that just came out. And we've got some anthologies and other things coming out soon. So if you need something to read in this time, and you want to stay engaged with Blue Rose or M&M or Freeport, we've got you covered.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, I think that about takes up our time today. Chris, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
My pleasure.
Great. My pleasure. It's great to hang out with you and tell some stories.
Hope I didn't give you flashbacks.
Little PTSD kicking in here, oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Yeah, well, I think I was getting blamed a little bit. I was taking some criticism for bringing in some 3 or 4 TSR people from a row who were just like, oh my God, thanks for saving D&D, so I needed to get somebody to come in who was going to, really tell like it is. Like,
you needed some punk rock credibility. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Need some punk rock credibility. All right. Okay. Well, that wraps us up. That wraps up another episode of Fireside. Peter Adkison. Thank you to our guest Chris Pramas, our studio manager Marcus Mays, our streaming manager Lauren Bond, our producer Derek Guter, and thanks to Gen Con TV for streaming us. Next week, our guest will be Bruce Cordell, who was one of those original TSR guys who's coming out. The good old Bruce, great guy.
Yeah.
I fell in love with Bruce because he worked on the Psionic. Love Psionic. So, we're gonna talk about that for sure. Okay, so that'll be next week here at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Between now and then, though, we have a lot of other good things on Gen Con TV tonight. Just a mere hour and a half away from now, the Westgate Irregulars, local authors playing D&D in their worlds. Friday at 11 a.m., we will have Table Takes, which is our news of the week by the Gen Con crew. Friday at 6 p.m. is Game Night with Gen Con, where we play games. So various combinations of us play various combinations of games with our game night. Next week, Monday, 6 p.m. is Table Games with Brothers Murph. Wednesday, 9 a.m. is Miniatures with Brothers Murph. And then, like I said, back at 4 p.m. next week, I will be returning with guest Bruce Cordell. All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And thanks everybody who watched.